In part 1, I pointed out that Schools of Conscience is fighting the epidemic of disengagement by building the nurturing capacity of K-12 schools. The epidemic of disengagement occurs because the system is built on the assumption that human beings can and should act like data processing robots. The teacher bots just have to get with the program of getting the information out of their heads into the instruction pump, which delivers the information to the heads of the kid bots. The kid bots regurgitate information on command for tests so that the admin bots can then adjust the incentive pumps. The incentives are supposed to ensure that the teacher bots and kid bots produce the right patterns in the data when they do what the program tells them to do. In the abstract, this model seems pretty good because it gives us a nice feedback loop. In fact, I was encouraged by this system to get the symbols of achievement without doing the real intellectual and emotional work necessary for mastering the material. The system got me to act like a data processing robot. And when we humans act like data processing robots, what we learn is a pathetic shadow of what we could have learned. The idea that education is just delivery has led the system to depend on vanity metrics. In case you're not familiar with the term, it comes from the world of entrepreneurial businesses. A vanity metric is data that gives a decision maker the illusion of knowing something useful. The classic example is a hit counter on a business website. Knowing that you have traffic on your site is very reassuring, but knowing how many hits you get is actually useless because it doesn't tell you what to do to get more revenue. Now, if you knew that each person what each person clicked on when they went to your site, then you could figure out how to more reliably direct them to the money-making pages. The opposite of a vanity metric is an actionable metric. When you know exactly what to do next, then you have an actionable metric. Actionable metrics are the key to fighting the disengagement epidemic in education. Now, let me clarify what actionable metrics we need in education. This is the learning tree. It's a growing mental maps model of education and starts with a concern for getting from the now moment into future moments in a way that enables us to participate meaningfully in the generation of the new nows. The model includes a feedback loop that has meaning to real humans and can help us productively redirect our efforts in schools. The learning tree has 8 roots that seek out crucial nutriments in the soil of the situation. The nutriments are the 8 primary human needs that I mentioned in part 1. Air, water, food, shelter, sleep, relatedness, competence, and autonomy. The feedback loop, once it is complete, will show how we shape situations in order to better meet our primary needs. The roots come together to form the trunk of well-being. The roots and the trunk together define what we mean by nurturing. The capacity to provide reliable access to the primary nutrients for human functioning is what we at Schools of Conscience aim to build in schools. The human mind, depicted as a tree here with the 8 roots of primary human needs, uses the energy of motivation to shape the structure of attitudes, direct the dual processes of mind, and develop a pattern of engagement as we move up the trunk of well-being. And poof, we have actionable metrics for education. My published research on motivation found that the alternative schools I studied maintained intrinsic motivation, in contrast to 30 years of data showing that the intrinsic motivation consistently declines in mainstream public and private schools. Intrinsic motivation is important because it reflects both well-being and it is the gold standard for the best possible learning outcomes. Moving on up, we get to the branches of experience, meaning all of our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. The roots and trunk are completely non-conscious processes that determine what we become conscious of as those processes produce the activities that we enact. After that, we have the leaves, flowers, and fruits of all possible outcomes. Next, we have to understand the interaction between individuals and their context. You may not know about real trees, but what starts out as a tiny acorn becomes a massive oak tree by pulling over 95% of the material substance it uses to build itself out of thin air. The process of photosynthesis in trees takes carbon dioxide from the air, then uses energy from the sun to break off the carbon atom, to use as a building block for itself, and then exhales the 2 oxygen atoms. In this metaphor, a modicum of individuality derived from how the individual found access to primary need supports in the current situation. travels up to combine with a bunch of substance that comes from A, organizations, institutions, and or groups such as schools or families, and B, some input from distant sources like society, culture, or ancestors. Together, these three elements produce the structure that gives the shape to the tree. The final important step in this model is how over time the leaves, flowers, and fruit fall down to become the mulch of the new now. There is some kind of relationship between where the roots find access to need supports and where those resources end up becoming a leaf, a flower, or a fruit. It is an important part of the cycle of feedback that we try to align the outcomes of our experiences with the ways we have found access to need-satisfying resources. This relationship between the roots and the leaves and the flowers and fruits has influence on the structure of both our individuality and the composition of the situation. Now, about those vanity metrics. The notion of pedagogy used in schools today is almost exclusively concerned with the upper portions of the tree only. Teachers engage with students in classrooms. Together, most teachers and students engage with a set of curriculums and some assessments to be able to justify their existence to outsiders. If all there is to pedagogy is the activities that make up classroom experience, then it makes perfect sense to manage it like a factory full of robots. But also notice that a whole lot of what shapes human behavior is not encompassed by the traditional notion of pedagogy. Given this view, we can see that the vanity metrics that drive our system are completely understandable. No one was conspiring to cause disengagement. The vanity metrics are a perfectly logical way of managing a system of activities and outcomes. But when you assume that the surface features of the classroom are all there is to it, then you do not account for the hidden factors. While the concept of the hidden curriculum has been around for many decades, it has not gotten traction with school management because it was too vague to be useful. Given the obvious patterns of disengagement and the intractability of high-profile problems with schools, any reasonable person would agree that something hidden is going on. But until now, it has not been at all clear how to manage those hidden factors effectively. We are developing the first hidden curriculum toolbox, a set of practical tools that will enable schools to manage their hidden curriculum. The hidden curriculum is where brains interact with policies. Neither brains nor policies can be directly observed in a classroom, but how they interact creates limits on what can happen there. Brains are only indirectly changeable, but policies are directly changeable. We have a three-step epidemiological plan to fight disengagement. Educate is about how to get the adults in each school to understand and apply the learning tree meta model. We provide professional development coursework and other forms of support services to schools to do that. Equip. It's about ensuring that each school community will have access to a valid and robust system for gathering actionable data. One of the key elements of getting the equipping process to scale is to develop an accreditation model based on well-being. Traditional accreditation is based on a combination of examining academic delivery practices and institutional integrity. Well-being needs to become a crucial part of that process, such that schools that do not demonstrate maintenance of motivation and/or engagement in their student and teacher population should have their accreditation suspended until they can turn that around. Advocate is about shifting the larger policy context for schools at district, state, and federal levels to ensure that schools will be able to protect and defend nurturing pedagogical choices from outside interference. The Nurturing is the Foundation policy framework is designed to be a tool that schools can use to effectively argue their case when confronted by powerful authorities who insist that the school conform to traditional notions of pedagogy that may be psychologically inappropriate. It is important to understand where this notion of education fits into the bigger picture of knowledge. This work is built on solid, well-established scientific insights. In science, there are some things that are so well established that they're considered effectively irrefutable. Starting with physics. If you are trying to contribute to the field of physics and make a claim that contradicts the idea of the fundamental forces or one of the laws of thermodynamics, then your work will be rejected. In chemistry, the inviolable ideas are embedded in the periodic table of the elements. In biology, it is that all life is cellular and that all cells are molecular. And biology is the proper foundation for the practice of medicine, which takes the causes of communicable diseases to be germs. Notice that practitioners must rely on the foundations established by a basic science. Psychology is the basic science of the mind, and there's a consensus emerging in psychology that the human mind has a dual process nature. Daniel Kahneman named his most recent book Thinking Fast and Slow to capture the essence of this idea. We have a fast, intuitive, non-conscious mind that shapes our experiences in a myriad of ways that we're just not aware of. We also have a slow, rational, and conscious mind that we are mostly aware of but has limited power to affect what is happening within experience. The learning tree extends the dual process mind idea. Decades ago, Edward Deci and Richard Ryan formulated what they call the basic psychological needs subtheory within their larger self-determination theory. They propose that there are, using my term for them, primary psychological needs that are necessary for humans to flourish. Here, I'm extending beyond their claim by saying that fulfilled primary human needs cause engagement, and that engagement causes education. What has been very well established in the decades since Deci and Ryan proposed their theories is that, in fact, the human psychological needs are on the same level as the physiological needs that everyone already recognizes as primary. So primary means that they have non-neutral effects on well-being. Notice that you die from neglect of these needs. They are not derived from any other needs, and they are universal across the globe. So what is most relevant to education is that in addition to the 4 physiological needs shown here, there are also 4 psychological needs for sleep, relatedness, competence, and autonomy. Neglecting these needs will not kill you directly, but they do cause various forms of psychological distress, such as anxiety and depression. Suicide suggests that you can die from persistent psychological distress, but only indirectly. On the other hand, fulfillment of the primary needs leads to well-being, which leads to engagement. While this is not currently accepted in education in the same way that the germ theory of disease is accepted in medicine, it should be. And I take this one step further to say that full engagement is the cause of education. At the beginning of part 1, I pointed out how Hollywood teacher as savior movies portray the attitude of the outcasts and delinquents who are supposed to be saved by the main character in each movie. The learning tree meta model provides us with a way to predict what it is about any given teacher or principal that would lead to such extraordinary results. The common denominator of the movies and the realities behind those stories is support for primary human needs of the students. Recall that primary needs are the roots of the tree. If you watch these movies carefully, you can see how Hollywood gets it at least partly right by focusing on how the teachers have to start by establishing a relationship of mutual respect. After that, after they have established a respectful relationship, then they find ways to support the autonomy of their students and also their sense of competence for handling the tasks the teacher expects them to do. According to this model, better and more consistent support for the primary needs of the students will lead to better outcomes, regardless of the pedagogical commitments of each school. Promising pedagogical models in the real world are numerous. Democratic schools, homeschooling, EdVision's charter schools, Montessori, Waldorf, Reggio Emilio, natural learning relationships, big picture schools, high-tech high, micro schools, rights-respecting schools, and probably many, many others. We have a plan for helping all kinds of schools to ensure that their faculty and staff can effectively demonstrate the integrity of their pedagogy by establishing a proper foundation of primary need support. If we can end the epidemic of disengagement, all teachers can be inspiring catalysts like those portrayed in the movies, and all students can learn beyond the expectations that might otherwise determine their fate. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me through my website at schoolsofconscience.org. Thanks for watching.